Hello, my name is Christian Fischer, and I'd like to welcome you to my contribution to the Sustainability Festival Bolzano this year. I will talk about developments in the consumption of alternative proteins. And I'd like to do this in the following way. In general, I'll talk about, I will present an economic perspective on novel food trends. And after a short introduction, I will explain a little bit the context, the human diet, and then we'll go into the alternative proteins, where I first will define what they are and provide some examples. Then we look at some market trends, and then we'll come to an assessment of sustainability and health impacts. And the final slide will conclude. Now, first of all, probably we should clarify the role of science, which is to use data and scientific study to inform people in a neutral, objective way. And I am not an activist scientist, someone who uses his public positions to promote personal positions. And therefore, I would also like to make clear that I follow a normal balanced diet, which includes also once or twice a week a meal containing meat. Now, I am an agricultural economist, and therefore I will look at the economic aspects of our food system, which is complex. That means I'm interested in the people issues, the jobs, the incomes, the impacts of what production of certain product means to them. If a food technologist or food scientist would give this presentation, it would look completely different. My focus is the way of food from the producer to the consumer. And now let's start with a little bit of the longer term picture of food in general. And here we have to say that we have the situation that fashions and trends come and go over the years. So here you see a list of topics that were hot in the last 100 years, if you like, and it changes every few years because consumers in general want to have something new every now and then. So if you look at the product level at the top, you can see the hot products in different years. From the 2000s, we talk about so-called superfoods, and there's every 5 years or so, there's a new product which is considered to be especially good. If you look at certain diets, we have also a succession of diets over the time, from low fat to high protein and so on. And also there are certain food paradigms, like in the 1990s, they were GMO free, then came organic, then local and so on. So every few years there's something different, and we should keep this in mind. Now, what determines actually what will become a permanent part of our reality, or a fad or a fashion? And this is basically related to the substance of arguments and then the adoption of a majority of people. So if a majority of people decides that is good and that is right and then starts consuming it for the longer term, then that will become permanent. Otherwise, we talk about fashions and fads. Now, let's turn to the context and our diet. And here I'd like to start to have a look at global food production and consumption. So this is really the world diet, if you like. So you see on the left all the different major food groups, from the animal products at the bottom to the plant products at the top. And then you see how important they are globally for different indicators. The first column gives us the land use, and we can see that the animal products use most of the land in the production. Then comes the production in terms of quantity, and here it's fairly equal, but it's mostly in terms of tons, it's mostly plant products that dominate here. Then we have the amount of calories they provide, and here we can see that the calories is mostly coming from the vegetable products, the plant products. Here 2/3 of the calories. And on the other hand, if you look at the protein on the very right, the last column, then you can see that about 50% of the protein comes from animal products, including seafood. Now, if we look in the next slide, this gives us a contribution of the animal products to our total diet over time. It starts in the 1960s and goes until just recently. And for the moment, we just look at the bottom, so it's the horizontal axis, which gives us the share of plant products in total energy supply. And this also gives you then vice versa the share of animal products. And we can see that there has been an evolution. So in general, the world today consumes more calories coming from animal products, but that share has not increased by a lot. So in the 1960s, it was about 16% of the global diet came from animal products, and now we talk about 18%. Okay, so just to understand how important plant and animal products are. Now, if we look at some trends in meat production in particular, then here we have the global picture and also the provisions in the future. So if we start with this little chart on the top, and this is the world from 1960 to predictions to 2050, and you can see overall total meat production and consumption will increase. In the last 50 years or so, it has in particular increased in developing countries and mostly in China and other Asian countries, whereas in Europe and also North America, total consumption of meat and production of meat has been already stagnant. In the future, we will still have an increase in total meat consumption, mostly because the world population is growing. And in some poorer countries, as they get richer, they will want to consume also more animal products. Therefore, if we look at per capita consumption, and here on the right, you see a fairly detailed graph about developments of per capita consumption in different areas of the world and for different types of meat, then we can say that we are probably at the peak today. So per capita consumption will not increase much more anymore. A little bit, maybe beef in China is still increasing, and poultry all over the world is still increasing per capita, but otherwise per capita meat consumption is stagnant and is rather staying this way in the next 30-40 years. Now, we also need to understand the importance, the crucial importance of livestock for the human's existence. In fact, more than 1 billion people, 1 person out of 7 in this world, depends on livestock. And that is because livestock is more than just food. Also, food is a very important part of it. So if we look at what it means to own farm animals, ruminants, pigs, poultry, etc., then above all they produce food that is of a high quality and contains very important nutrients. Not only protein, 28% of global protein consumption today comes from animal products. So that is without the fish. If you add the fish, you have the 50% I mentioned before. But there are also a variety of essential nutrients like iron, zinc, vitamins that come from meat, milk, and eggs. And we need to keep in mind that globally, 1/3 of the population, and also in Europe, about 20% of young children and women suffer today from diet-related anemia, which means a dangerous blood disorder. So that is one aspect. The other one is that farm animals provide other products that are important, in particular for poor people, like wool, leather, feathers, and so on. And they are crucial for the production of plant-based food. So a lot of agriculture today, in particular mixed crop livestock systems, the animals are essential to produce plant-based food in terms of manure, but also the labor, the power, the draft power that animals provide. Therefore, farm animals are living assets. That means capital for poor people and income sources. And therefore, they are important. Now, let's talk about the alternative proteins. What are alternative proteins? And basically, we have a whole spectrum of non-meat, milk, egg, fish protein sources. And traditionally, or in general, we have also very natural protein plants like legumes like soy, peas, beans, nuts, cereals, wheat, rice contain plant protein, but also mushrooms, certain fruits and other vegetables contain natural plant protein. But they are not really the alternative proteins in the stricter sense. These are the ones which are here in green. But the complete list would also include other type of processed plant proteins, very traditional like tofu or tempeh, which are made from soybeans, or seitan, which is made from wheat gluten plant protein. But then these more novel ones are mycoproteins, which are the type of fungus or mold, and then the ultra-processed convenience products, which are so in our media, in the focus of our media today, like plant-based meats, plant-based milks, and so on. And then we also have animal cell culture or lab meat, which is in vitro culture using some techniques that come from medicine, basically. And then we have also insect or algae proteins, either whole insects like crickets or worms, mealworms, or some extracts from insects or algae that can be used as ingredients for other type of foods. Now, when I talk in the following about alternative protein, I'll talk about these three in green mostly, for which we have good studies and data. Now, so in general, this is some examples, and you probably well aware what's happening, what we can find in our supermarkets. In general, we have to also state that this is very much a trend coming from the Anglo-Saxon world, where it is particularly strong. So United States, England, Australia, New Zealand, and so on. If we look at it from a brand level, then you see here different brands which you might know or not, because they're mostly, as I said, used and well known in those countries. So we talk about Beyond Meat or Impossible Foods, Quorn, and brands like this. Here you see them classified, categorized by type, whether it's plant-based or cell-based, and what type of meat they are trying to replace. Okay, so that is what we are talking about. Now, some characteristics of these alternative proteins, some market trends. First of all, even though this is a complicated table, but there's just one thing we need to be aware, that these plant-based meats are usually highly processed, even ultra-processed, and often very often they have a long list of ingredients, and that means they have many additives. That means some of them actually use other animal products like egg white or dairy, or there is a use of antibiotics, in particular for the cell cultures, and also some of them have GMOs, genetically modified organisms, in the production of them. So you can see this here in red. Beyond Meat burger includes about 18 ingredients. If you look at a plant-based burger, which is a more private brand here in the Netherlands, we have about 26 different type of ingredients. Whereas if you look at a normal beef burger, the two at the bottom, you have about 9 or 10 types of ingredients. Now, how important are these types, these alternative proteins? Well, then we see here market shares basically for the world. You can see here the different areas of the world in the left in the graph, where the Asia Pacific is the biggest market. And then you see always the market shares of the different type of meats, so poultry and pork and so on. And that one in pink, that is the alternative protein market share. And you can see that these pink areas are tiny. So overall, globally, we talk about a market share today of 0.4% of all meats. And they have only in Asia Pacific a higher significance, 6%. because this is mostly tofu in China and other Asian countries where this is a traditional food, as you know, and therefore quite common. And tofu is part of these alternative proteins, as I mentioned also before. Okay, so if we look at the prediction for the future, then they are quite optimistic. Here is one which says that the conventional meat is going down a lot. Also, we have seen before that the other predictions actually say and that it will increase. Nevertheless, this is one of these predictions, and then they will slowly be replaced by novel vegan meat placements. So these are the plant-based meats, and the cultured meat is going to grow strongly according to this prediction. But personally, I believe it's quite optimistic. So if we look at some other aspects of these alternative plant products, plant-based meats, and here you see the price levels, current price levels. And you see the list of different protein sources. If we start with normal beef, then we have a price in dollars per 200 kilocal, which is about $1.5. And then if you look at cultured meat or insect protein or algae, you can see the prices go above 6, above 4, so 6 times, 5 times as much. So it is alternative protein is still quite expensive. The prices will come down, and here is some forecasts on when they will come down, how long it will take in order to reach parity with the prices of normal meat. Normal meat is here in pink, and then you can see here in the year 2023, the plant-based product should be, according to this forecast, have above the same or about the same level of prices than traditional meat. The microorganism-based products in 2025, and then the animal cell-based, the lab meat in the 2032 around, the prices will be equivalent. But for the moment, they are still quite expensive. Now, all this shows us that this is an industry that is attractive, that is it is fashionable and the prices are high, and therefore we see a lot of investments coming into the alternative protein sector. You can see here on the graph the amount of money that pours into this sector every year. It's really exploding, and also the number of deals. This is the line, the blue lines in this sector includes. Have exploded and really increased a lot. And in the meanwhile, it has become mainstream. So the major multinational food processors like Nestle or Unilever, or also the American big food processors, including meat companies, have now plant-based products, plant-based meats in their product portfolios. Like for Nestle, there is the Awesome Burger, and also Unilever has now about 700 vegan brands in Europe. One is the vegetarian butcher and delivers also to Burger King plant-based meat products. Okay, so it is really big business, if you like, today. This you should also keep in mind. Good. Now let's come to some assessment, some sustainability and health assessment of meat and alternative proteins. Now, I'd like to start with animal welfare issues, and this is a complicated topic, and I just want to provide you with one statistics to show a little bit the reality, because it's a lot in the media, it's industrial meat production and industrial animal keeping and so on. And we look here just at ruminants, so at beef and sheep and goats. And this is the type of production system globally, how these animals are kept. So as you know, ruminants are grazing animals, and we have 3 types of production systems. So there's grazing, there's mixed crop livestock systems, where there's plant production and animals at the same farm. And then we have the landless production systems, which are also referred to as industrial production systems. And if you look at the number of cattle and buffaloes and sheep and goats that are today globally kept in these industrial systems, production systems, then you can see the reality is that that share is fairly small. We talk about 2% and 1% of animals. If you look at the amount of beef and mutton, so the meat that comes from these animals, then we talk about 6% of beef production comes from these systems and only 1% of mutton. So this does not mean that in the other livestock production system there are no animal welfare issues. They are, but that what is highly controversial is these industrial systems, and you can see that globally they are really small. Now, another very important issue and the main reason why people have started to consume alternative protein is the links to climate change and other environmental aspects. I will here focus just on climate change, and there is a long list of studies and science and different views on that. I just refer to probably the best source what we have. This is the most recent study about land and climate change from the IPCC, so from the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change. And I will quote from this source, and I will just use 3 quotes. Also, this is a massive study which summarizes all the recent research regarding food, animal keeping, and consumption, food consumption. So first of all, if we look at the connection of food consumption and climate change, the report states, so if we include all emissions associated with pre- and post-production activities in the global food system, then the emissions are estimated to be between 21 and 37% of total net man-made greenhouse gas emissions. And this comes only with medium confidence. And that is mostly because you can see the range is so big. This is really from 21% to 37%. So there is considerably uncertainty how much actually comes from our food and contributes to climate change. There is an impact, that is clear, but there is just medium confidence. Now, there is robust evidence that diet shifts can mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. That is clear, that their diets do have an influence, but there is low agreement on how much could be achieved and what would be the effectiveness of interventions to promote diet shifts. Hence, the IPCC states, hence, the question is not about eating less meat for everyone, but to adopt sustainable supply and consumption practices across a broad range of food systems. And more specifically to alternative proteins, another quote, total technical mitigation potential of dietary changes is estimated as 0.7 to 8.0 gigatons of CO2 equivalents per year by 2050. Again, this is only medium confidence, and you can see here also the big range of estimates. So 0.7 to 8.0, a big range. And then specifically to the alternative products, alternative proteins, meat analogs such as imitation meat from plant products, cultured meat, and insects may help in the transition to more healthy and sustainable diets, although their carbon footprints and acceptability are uncertain. So you may interpret it as you like, but to me, this really means that the links between diets and climate change are not so strong. And this we can also see in some of the recommendations that I show you in the conclusions. So before I come to the conclusions, I'd like to focus on the health issues. The health issues are also not easy to quantify because health is something much more than, first of all, food production or food consumption. It includes also other lifestyle elements like the amount of exercise you do, but also your genetical makeup, the environment in which you live. All this has an influence on your health. It's not just food and consuming food, but within food is not just individual products you eat, but it is the whole range of products, so the whole diet. So that means the amount of individual foods and then also the mix of different foods you consume that makes the health impact. So it's very difficult to evaluate the effect of individual products. Nevertheless, some studies have done it, and here's a study including also the alternative proteins, and here you see the results. So basically, the red dots here give you the overall effect, and if it's above the line, then there's a negative effect on health, measured as percentage change to mortality, so how much it will reduce your lifespan. And if it's below the line, then it's more positive and it's more healthy. So if you look here, so beef is above the line, so it basically reduces your lifespan. It increases your mortality by 1.5%. But the next to it is already cultured beef, an alternative protein. And then comes pork. And then comes chicken, but chicken is already below the line, so it actually has a positive impact on health. And then come a whole range of other products which are more positive for your health. There's tofu, and then there's also insects, and then there's mycoprotein. But if you look at the last 3 or 4, the most healthy ones, these are natural protein plants like peas, beans, wheat, and so on, jackfruit. Okay, so much to the health impacts. Now, coming back to or concluding with overall recommendations and using recommendations from a massive and widely used study, the Eat Lancet Commission report, which promotes healthy and sustainable diets. You can see here on the picture what the a healthy and sustainable diet looks like. It should be about 50% fruit and vegetables. That is the left-hand side of the plate. And then we have a range of other products, including animal-based products. Okay, so overall, what should be avoided is a demonization of animal products. There are certainly costs or disadvantage related to traditional animal products, but there are also benefits. And with all other things, you should look at the balance of costs and benefits and not just at the costs of it. So a healthy and sustainable diet, as recommended by the Eat Lancet Commission, also includes traditional animal products. Roughly on average, this is a global average, it depends on age, depends on gender, it depends on your size which you have, but on average about 350 grams of animal products a day, including dairy and fish. So you see that also in that little chart on the bottom, the amounts of beef and poultry and eggs and fish, but it also should have protein from alternative sources. So it should have protein that is not coming from animals. And as you can see here, ideally it comes from natural protein plants, so mostly legumes or nuts. But it can also come from alternative proteins, which are, however, expensive, as we have seen, and which are ultra-processed. Okay, so the general recommendation is then to avoid over-consuming and also under-consuming traditional proteins. With this, I stop. I show you also the sources of this. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. You will find my email on the Unibiset website. Thanks for your attention.